So you got a VR headset for Christmas, and you don't know what games to play on it. Well, don't you worry, Uncle Lambo is here, and he's here to tell you what's what. He's made a list, he's checked it twice, he's found out what VR games are naughty and nice. Sit back, strap yourselves in, Lambo coming to town. So today I've put together a list of 25 of my most favourite VR games from the last few years. Now this covers a wide range of genres, so there's something here for everyone. These are all PC VR based games, so Vive, Rift, Windows Mixed Reality. No PlayStation VR games in this list because while I have a PlayStation VR, I haven't actually played any of the PlayStation VR exclusives from this year. So this is PC only. So without further ado, let's get into it. First of all, let's start with the elephant in the room, Beat Saber. Now there's a high likelihood that this game is already one of the reasons why you bought a VR headset, because let's be honest, it's been one of the most viral games of 2018. If for some reason you haven't heard of this game before, essentially it's Guitar Hero with lightsabers, so you slash blocks as they come towards you, in time to music. Now out of the box, this game has a really awesome soundtrack that was written for the game itself, and then aside from that, it's got custom song support. And the custom song scene is huge for this game. You can find all sorts of songs from Bohemian Rhapsody to Bitch Lasagna. So it's going to keep you going for a while. The game is a ton of fun and it uses VR really well. So if you're getting into VR, I would say that this game is a must-have. Another game that I would recommend as a must-have is called Richie's Plank Experience. Now, this is a very simple game where the idea is that in VR, you walk off a plank that's off the side of a skyscraper. You can even line up a real plank in real life and walk on that so it feels even more realistic. And then aside from that, it's got a few other mini games where you like fly around and put out fires. So very simple. It's not the kind that you're going to play for hours and hours on end. It's more so a game for showing off to your friends and family how cool VR is. And also it's a great game for pranking your friends, because you wait until they're like halfway out along the plank, then you just walk up, you give them a little bit of a shove, and you watch them panic and lose their balance. Lots of fun. So all around, it's a great little game for introducing to people what VR is like, and probably scarring them for life as well. Another game that I would recommend as an introductory experience for VR is Space Pirate Trainer. Now this is a wave-based arcade shooter. It's been out since the Vive launched, and it's got a lot of polish and a lot of content. This game is a great introductory game for people who are already gamers before trying out VR. It helps introduce how shooting in VR works, and it gets you used to actually moving your body while playing the game. And if you play it with your friends, it also becomes super competitive. This one's a great game to play if you've got a bunch of friends around. You just keep switching in and out to see whoever can get the highest score. Now, Job Simulator. This is another game that launched when the Vive launched about 2 years ago, and it pretty much set the standard for how interaction in VR works. It's essentially an interaction sandbox. You're put in an environment modeled after a bunch of real-world jobs, and you're given a bunch of tasks to complete using the items and the tools in front of you. And it's all from the perspective of robots far in the future who don't exactly have an accurate understanding of how human jobs worked. So it's a very funny game, and there's not much else out there like it. Now once you're done with Job Simulator, if you're a fan of Rick and Morty, you could then move on to Rick and Morty Virtual RICKALITY. Made by the same developers, has the exact same kind of gameplay and mechanic, but it's got a proper Rick and Morty story written around it. It is immensely funny. I would even recommend checking it out if you're not a fan of Rick and Morty. It's one of my favorite VR games because there aren't that many VR games out there right now that are written as well as this one. Another great series of games along the same vein are the Gallery Episode 1 and 2. Now these are less of an interaction sandbox like Job Simulator, and more like the classic point-and-click adventure games of old. Filled with a good story and some epic environments, this game's a must-have if you're a fan of single-player story-based games. Another great single-player game is Budget Cuts. Now this is a stealth-based game with a pretty unusual teleport mechanic that sees you throwing portals around rooms, trying to sneak past robots, or just throwing knives at them and running away. It's easy to pick up, it's got some pretty engaging gameplay. It took the developers about 2 years from their first demo to actually release the game. It was definitely worth the wait. This is one of the more inventive games that works with teleportation as a mechanic and make something really cool out of it. If you want something a bit more fast-paced and with a bit more action, Arizona Sunshine and SUPERHOT VR. They are two pretty awesome VR FPSs that are both very different in their own ways. Arizona Sunshine is a zombie shooter game. It's got a proper single-player campaign where you play as some guy trying to fight off zombies and get to safety. It's a really polished campaign, and once you're finished with it, there are arcade modes you can play single-player or co-op, so it'll keep you going for quite a while. SUPERHOT VR, on the other hand, is essentially SUPERHOT reimagined for VR. It takes one simple mechanic, which is that time only moves when you move, and makes it pretty physical. So if you're standing completely still, nothing happens. And as soon as you start to move your hands or your head, time will start to speed up and slow down depending on how fast you're moving. The game features new levels built from the ground up for VR. It's not a port of the original game. It takes the original mechanic, reinvents it for VR, and in my opinion, makes it way better than the original game ever was, and the original game was pretty good to start off with. If guns aren't your style but fantasy is, you really can't go past SKYRIM VR. Now I know, this game's been ported to pretty much every platform under the sun, but it's truly something special in VR. It's one of the largest games for VR, and while some of the gameplay is a little bit clunky, there's really nothing else that comes close when it comes to the scale of the gameplay, scale of the world, and the atmosphere and everything. It's worth a playthrough in VR, even if you've already played it a million times before. And on the plus side, because it's based off of the SKYRIM Special Edition for PC, most of the mods that work for that game also work for SKYRIM VR, so you can have your Thomas the Tank Engine flying dragons flying around everywhere if you want. Same for the visual mods. Because this game is kind of old, you can push it really far in VR, make it look super pretty. If you're after something a little bit more built from the ground up for VR, Blade and Sorcery is a relatively new game that's been making a lot of waves on YouTube recently. Essentially, it's a gladiator game where you get to fight off lots of enemies using a wide range of medieval weapons. It is in early access right now, so while it is a bit light on content, the core mechanics themselves are pretty fun and have been keeping me entertained for quite a few hours already. For something a bit more complete, Gorn is a very similar kind of game, except a bit more cartoonish. Physics aren't as good as Blade and Sorcery's, however there is a lot more to do in that game. There are a lot more weapons to play around with. It's a little bit more of a goofy, gory kind of game than Blade and Sorcery. They're both pretty awesome games, so check out the both of them. If you're after something that's a little bit less combat based, Climb Me and To The Top are two very awesome climbing games that both put their own twist on the genre. Climb Me is pretty much pure rock climbing, so you use your hands and you physically grab onto the environment and pull yourself around. It's got a lot of challenge maps built into it. It's got custom map support as well, so there is a ton of community-made maps that range from all sorts of difficulties, from "this is easy, why did you make this?" to "this is impossible, why did you make this?" The game is both single-player and multiplayer, so if you've got friends that have VR headsets, it's great for being able to try and climb massive mountains together. To The Top, on the other hand, is more of a speedrunning kind of game. There are a ton of tracks in the game where you'll be running around, climbing, flinging yourself everywhere, racing to set the fastest time possible on every track. Now, while this game is very fun, it's not for the faint of heart. If you find yourself getting sick from VR easily, probably give this one a skip until you get used to it more. But if you do possess an iron stomach, go for it. So Sprint Vector is another favorite title of mine. Essentially, it's speedrunning meets skating meets Mario Kart. There are a ton of tracks in the game set over all sorts of different environments that have shortcuts everywhere, and then there's power-ups scattered around everywhere to give you an edge over your opponents, or just outright blow them up. The game has both single-player races and multiplayer races. It's been a while since I last played the multiplayer, so I'm not sure how active that community is these days, but there is enough single-player content in there to make it worth it. For a more traditional racing game set in actual cars, there are two main games, ASSETTO CORSA and Project Cars 2. Both of these games feature loads of real-world cars, real-world tracks, and locations. They both have very good support for steering wheels as well, so if you wanted to, you could set up like a full simulator rig with a steering wheel, racing seat, etc. Now, I've only really played ASSETTO CORSA, not Project Cars, so I can't say which of these two is the better. However, if you're going to go ahead and set up a full-on simulator rig like that, you've probably got enough money to buy the both of them. If you can only get one, however, ASSETTO CORSA I found pretty fun, and it's got a lot of support for custom tracks and custom cars. Some other cockpit-based games I like to recommend include Elite Dangerous. Now this is a sci-fi space simulator, where essentially you have free roam to become whatever you want, be that a fighter pilot, a trader, space pirate, etc, etc. It has really good VR support. If you pair it up with like a voice command software, you're pretty much set to live out all your space pirate fantasies. Another cockpit-based game that I reckon is massively underrated is Battlezone VR. So they made a Battlezone game for VR where you pilot a tank in a procedurally generated campaign on a quest to take out an AI that has pretty much taken over the world. The tank mechanics and driving are pretty fun, it's got a pretty cool art style, and because the campaign is procedurally generated, it is very replayable. You can also choose the length of the campaigns, the difficulty, choose different tanks, set up tank loadouts, etc. I'm surprised this game doesn't get more love, because it's been one of my favorite VR games since I got into VR. Another game worth mentioning is Subnautica. Now this isn't cockpit based, but it is a seated VR game where you use your gamepad. It doesn't have motion control support. It's essentially Subnautica with a VR camera. So this is another one that you would only want to play if you've got an iron stomach, but essentially it is the full game of Subnautica ported to VR. It really does add something new to the game. It's really cool being able to swim around and have that full-on depth perception and everything. And there are quite a lot of hours of gameplay in this. It's one of the few survival games that we have of VR right now, and it's a pretty good one. It's also currently free on the Epic Store for the next few days. You really can't go past free. Now, what list of the best games would be complete without Minecraft? Now, there are two different ways you can play Minecraft in VR. We'll start off with the official one. So the Windows Store version of Minecraft has official support for VR. Unfortunately, it's only for the Rift and Windows mixed reality headsets. You can probably make it work on the Vive using a program such as Revive. Haven't tried it myself though, so I can't say if it does or doesn't work. Now the main selling point of this version of Minecraft is that it has full-on cross-platform support with pretty much everything. So you can play with people on Xbox, on Nintendo Switch, on iOS, Android, PC. That's probably one of the coolest experiences that I've had, setting up a multiplayer game where I've had someone playing in VR, on console and mobile, all together in the same game. It's pretty much no other games that allow you to do that. The other version of Minecraft for VR is called VIVECRAFT. Now this is a mod for the original Java version of Minecraft that adds Steam VR support. And it's got a bunch of really cool controls and mechanics that the official VR Minecraft doesn't have. Now because this mod is based on Steam VR, it does work with the Vive, the Rift, Windows mixed reality headsets, and because it's based on the Java version of Minecraft, it does also work on Java Minecraft servers. You don't need any special mods on the server itself, you just need the mod on your client. So if you aren't planning on playing it with friends who own it on mobile or Xbox, definitely give VIVECRAFT a try. Okay, so now we have a few multiplayer specific VR games coming up. First of which is PAVLOV VR. Again, this is another VR game that's gone pretty viral this year, and essentially it's CSGO reinvented for VR. It has a lot of very similar mechanics. It has your standard terrorist versus counter-terrorist bomb planting mode, as well as a bunch of other game modes such as deathmatch and gun game. Where this game really shines over other games similar to it though, is with its custom map support. People have been porting maps from all sorts of games over into PAVLOV, from like original Counter-Strike to original Halo, even maps from Banjo and Kazooie. Doesn't make sense, but it's a lot of fun. And then there's also the custom game modes people have been making, from things like Trouble in Terrorist Town to Prison Break. It's also got a very active multiplayer community. Whenever you hop on there, there's usually like a ton of games going. It's not hard to get into a game at all. This game has a lot of cool things coming next year, including full-on Knuckles support, its own Battle Royale mode, and who knows what other sorts of mods and game modes it's going to get. Another great multiplayer only game is Rec Room. Now this is a free sports-based multiplayer game. It features a ton of mini games such as dodgeball to frisbee golf. Then it has a bunch of shooter modes as well, like paintball, capture the flag, and even has its own battle royale mode as well. Right now it's probably the best battle royale game for VR out there. And because it's free, again, you really can't go past it. Alright, we're getting close to the end of the list, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to suggest a few Rift exclusives. Now, there is a program called Revive, which allows you to play Rift games on Vive, so you don't actually have to miss out on these. You just got to get them through the Oculus store. And we're going to start off with Robo Recall. So this one actually comes free with your Rift, and it is Epic Games' take on VR shooters. Now, because it's a game made by a AAA studio, it is pretty polished. It's a single-player game where you'll fight across various levels across the city, fighting off waves and waves of robots that have gone rogue. The game features some of the best graphics in VR gaming out there, and in my opinion has some of the best feeling guns that I've played with in VR as well. It's very arcadey, very fun. It does have mod support as well, however I don't think that many people have made mods for it. Next up we've got Dirt Rally, which is another car racing game, however it is of a smaller scope than Project Cars and ASSETTO Corsa. It's another really polished racing game that's definitely worth playing if you're a fan of fast cars and off-road tracks. Last but not least, we have Echo Arena. This is a free multiplayer game which is essentially Frisbee soccer in zero gravity. It's a really fun game with an active multiplayer community that's even picking up some steam as an esports title. Now there's also a purchasable expansion to this game called Echo Combat. It takes that zero gravity movement mechanic and adds guns. It has a bunch of game modes similar to TF2/Overwatch, ones where you'll either push a payload or capture some capture points. It's a very fun take on the FPS genre, especially once you factor in the zero gravity movement. And that's a wrap. There's a lot more games I could have mentioned, but I did want this video to end eventually and not go for hours and hours. I hope you found a few games in there that piqued your interest and that you'll check out further. I hope you have fun with the new VR headset. Wish you a Merry Christmas, and I'll see you in the next one.